Hi, I'm Heather from Heather Handmade, and today I am sharing my newest pattern, which is the Upcycled shirt, romper, shirt, and dress. So this is a pattern that uses a men's button-up shirt and turns it into a romper, a dress, or a shirt for toddlers and babies. So I made a romper for my son when he was maybe 12 or 18 months, and I shared a free pattern. So that was 9 or 10 years ago. The problem was I wasn't very good at making patterns, and there was a couple of the ways I made it that, like, the way you sew it was not right. So I have now gone back. I have fixed the pattern so that the construction is correct and everything, fits together well. But I've also expanded it so that it goes from 3 months to size 24 months. So there's 6 sizes in there. And then it has the romper version, the dress version, and the shirt version. I am really excited to share this pattern with you because I have worked really, really hard to make it work. It is an intermediate level, doing the collar and doing the placket down here for the snaps. There's a gusset in here that is a little bit trickier. I think a beginner could do it if they're willing to watch this whole video and take the process really slow. So these versions have a collar and that reuses the original collar from the shirt. There is also a version where you can make the dress, the shirt, or the romper with bias binding for the neckline. And this is a much easier way to finish the neckline. It would be more of a beginner level, so this would work if you want to make the pattern but you need it to be slightly easier. You would still have the placket for, between the legs. So that would be still something that you would have to work through, but it would be slightly easier than doing the collar. This is a really great way to reuse men's shirts, especially if there's a shirt that has special meaning for you, like someone has passed away or someone has changed sizes, and you want to be able to reuse it for a child or a grandchild. It makes it really meaningful, and it keeps that item, it makes it so you can still use it but in a different way. You can get my pattern on my website or on Etsy, and it is on sale for 1 week only from today. Once you go get the pattern, come back and I will show you how to make the romper version. I'm not showing you how to make the shirt or dress version. If you want to make these, you can pretty much do it from the pattern instructions. If there's any tricky parts that you don't understand, then you can come back and watch the video and skip around to find the techniques that you need for to help you make it. I have a basic men's button-up shirt. This is about a size medium. This is just a solid color. And one thing to note when you are working with men's button-up shirts, that usually the fabric looks the same on the inside and the outside because it's woven, especially if it's like a plaid or a stripe. And so you do have to keep track of the right side, like when you're working with the placket or like the collar and stuff. So I'm going to show you how to cut out the pattern pieces, and then I'll show you how to sew it together. So the first piece we're going to do is the front body piece. So you're going to fold your shirt in half and you're going to line up your placket along the front. So this front doesn't line up with the edge of the placket. It's going to line up with the line of buttons and buttonholes. And there are some circles to mark where you want the buttons to kind of be in between. So you want the buttons for this size to be in between here and here. So I have a button here and there's a button here. So I'm just going to place it like this so that the button does not get in the way of this seam or this seam down here. So you're lining up this line with the center of the button placket, and depending on where you cut it out, there is a chance you're going to cut through the pocket, which I find it to be just fine. The kids don't use the pockets, and it kind of shows that you cut the romper from an adult shirt. So it doesn't bother me. If it bothers you, you can unpick it and just remove it completely. So now I'm going to cut this out, and when I cut out the front, you come down here on the neckline like this, and then you just come straight out like that. And then this, you don't cut. You want to leave this here so we can reuse that placket. And you're going to do the same here at the bottom, where you just cut straight out like this. To cut out the back piece, you are going to fold the shirt along the center back, and you are going to line up your pattern piece like this with this straight line. This back is going to be on the fold, and I'm going to actually put it down closer to the bottom so I can preserve more fabric here at the top, and then cut this piece out. Then you're going to come up to the back yoke. That is that piece along the back of the top, like the upper back of the shirt. And we're going to pull this out flat. So I have seen that this yoke is very short, and you never quite know what you're going to get when you are going to cut out. I mean, each shirt, I've seen collars done differently, yokes done differently, plackets done differently, so you kind of just have to guess to see if it will work. As you can see, this is the largest size. It's not going to fit in here. It would get in the way. So what you would do instead is you are going to use a different part of the shirt. So I'm actually going to cut along the bottom of the yoke to get rid of that pleat, to help open this up. But I have seen yokes that are really tall and fitted in. This is actually the first one I've seen, and I've made lots and lots of shirt rompers to work on this pattern. This is the first one I've seen that was too short to use. It might have worked with the smallest size, but that's one thing to note while you're working on this pattern when you're cutting it out, that there's a chance that your shirt will be slightly different. I tried to accommodate as many different things as possible in the pattern for different shirt creations, but there's only so much I could do. So you can see this is all flat, and I have a nice fold there. And when you do a yoke, you are going to need 2 pieces of fabric. So I'm going to cut out one yoke here, and I'm going to find another place on the shirt to cut out the yoke. If you don't have enough fabric to cut 2 yokes, and you can't use the yoke from the original shirt, then one of the yokes will be hidden on the inside of, it's kind of like a small lining. So you can use a different fabric, like quilting cotton or something like that. And I'm going to cut one more yoke from the sleeve. This works for me because I am doing short sleeves, so I will have room in the sleeves to do another. One sleeve can do 2 short sleeves, but if I were doing long sleeves, I wouldn't be able to do this. So now I'm going to cut the sleeves. From the sleeve, you can just keep the sleeve folded on the crease at the top and cut out your sleeve on the fold. Just make sure that you cut out 2 sleeves. Now I'm going to cut out the collar. So I'm folding the collar in half like this, and it creates like lots of layers of fabric in one place, but it's an easier way to cut it out. Then you're going to take your collar pattern and you are going to just fit it in. So this one actually fits here, but I have seen it when the collar does not fit. I'm going to have to do some unpicking since there is some of the stitches here, but I've done that before and it's not that big of a deal. You have to do some unstitching when you're reusing the collar anyway. And when you cut the collar like this, you are getting two collars. There's some more work we have to do with it before we can use it, but you have the right number of collar pieces. Now from the rest of the fabric, we need to do 3 of the inseam facings, and these are cut on the fold. So I'm going to cut these out. Now, if you don't have enough fabric for the facing, as long as you can get one of them will show and 2 of them will kind of be more hidden. So if you can get at least one, then it will work out. Now the last piece we're going to cut is the gusset, and you just need 1 of these. So I'm going to open up the sleeve. You can use it anywhere on the body of the shirt, any fabric. This fabric will need to match, so you will want to use fabric from the shirt, and you can cut it out. Now this is all the fabric that is left over after cutting out the romper. You can see you've pretty much used most of the big pieces. There's pretty much only scraps left. So now we are going to put the romper together, and I'll show you how to sew it. The first thing we're going to do is take the back piece, and we're going to take the gusset, and we are going to place the gusset right here in this spot. So you're going to match up these. This is the center of the gusset and the center of the this inseam area, and then we're going to match up this point down here with this part that kind of juts out, and then the same to the other side. We are sewing 2 opposing curves, like opposite curves going the opposite way, so it makes it feel weird, and to sew it you just have to move slowly and kind of adjust it as you go. So you can see I'm just kind of like pushing this into place, and I'm pinning this. Now I'm going to sew this seam with a 3/8. Now I'm going to sew this seam and finish the raw edges. Now you are going to top stitch this seam allowance out away from the gusset and towards the body to keep a nice, flat. You don't want this seam like poking out and irritating a little baby. Next, you're going to take your 2 yokes, and we are going to sew them to the top right here at the straight edge of the top of the back body. But the trick when you're doing a yoke is that we are going to do a method called the burrito method. So you take one and right sides together, you place it along this top edge. Then you take the other one and do right sides together on the wrong side of the top. So you have 3 layers together, and there's a yoke on the top and a yoke on the bottom. The body is sandwiched in between. So we're going to pin this together. And we're going to sew this seam straight across. So I sewed that seam, I flipped both yokes up and pressed it up away from the body. So that seam allowance is right inside and it's enclosed, you don't have to finish it. Now I'm going to top stitch, that's stitching 1/4 inch away from the fold along this back seam. So that is done, and now we are going to attach it to the front piece using the burrito method. This is the right side of the back, and you're going to place the right side of the front pieces to the right side of the back. But when you do this, you are going to pull the back yoke piece. So that's the one that you put the wrong side to the right side of the back of the shirt or the romper, and you are going to fold it down out of the way. You don't want it to be in this seam. And we're going to pin these shoulders together. Now we're going to take the bottom part of the romper and you're going to roll it up like this into a burrito. That's why they call it the burrito method. And then you will start to see that this is the yoke we pulled out of the way in the back, and you are going to pull it up around this roll of fabric, and you're going to pin this seam, this shoulder seam together, so that again you will have 3 layers of fabric together. Now you're going to sew these 2 shoulder seams. So now the best part is you get to unroll your burrito through the neckline, and you can see now those shoulder seams are enclosed inside the yoke. So you're going to press this seam flat and then top stitch this seam just like we did this one along the back. Now to be able to reuse these collar pieces, I like to reuse the collar because you can just reuse the interfacing that's already in here, but the problem is that it's sewn in a way where you can't just take the 2 pieces apart. So you will need to unpick all of the stitching that is still there to separate it out. So once you have it all unpicked, you're going to have 4 separate pieces, and 2 of the pieces will still have interfacing from the original. So this is the right side of the top part of the collar. This is the right side of the bottom part of the collar. It used to be sewn together like this, but when we unpicked it, it came undone. So what you're going to do is you are going to actually sew this seam back together. So you're going to match up this original seam allowance, and you're going to sew it, so then you will have just 2 collar pieces instead of 4. So now you have 2 collar pieces, one that is interfaced, one that is not, and you are going to place them right sides together and pin from the front up the point and across the top. We're not going to pin this bottom part, the part that attaches to the neckline. So now sew this seam Once it's sewn, you are going to trim these corners. So the points that go out, you trim off to reduce bulk, and then when it's a point pointing in, you're going to clip down to the like stitching point, but you don't want to clip through the stitching. Then you can use scissors or pinking shears, and you are just going to kind of trim this curve to help reduce bulk when you turn it right side out. Now you're going to turn the collar right side out, and you're going to use a point turner to press out the points of the collar. Once you have it turned right side out, you can press it flat to get nice and crisp edges. You are going to add a row of stitching on the interface side, 3/8 inch from the edge. You probably won't be able to get all the way to the seam, but you can start an inch away and then go across. So now we are going to attach the collar to the romper. So you're going to match the notch in the back of the collar with the notch of the yoke. And then we're going to come around and match this seam in the front here with the front of the placket. And it gets a little tricky with the curve of the collar, but it is possible to pin it in there. And then you're going to match up the raw edge in between the pins, and then we're going to do the same on the other side. So now we're going to sew this seam along here. You're going to start where these, at this seam here, the seam that comes this curve right here. So that's where you're going to start sewing and sew all the way across. The collar is a straight edge and the neckline is a curve. So you're going to have to be careful that you keep both of the fabrics, you know, smooth and flat as you're sewing. So this is sewn on. Now you will press all of the seam allowances up inside towards the collar. And once you have done that, you're going to take your collar and, you know, put it back to the right shape, and you're going to fold this top edge on that stitching line, and then you are going to bring it down and pin it so that those stitching lines match. You want it to cover that stitching line so that when we sew it, it will enclose those seam allowances inside. So you're going to do that across the neckline. And when you are working with this edge, I like to fold the neckline up, and then I fold my collar over and bring it down on top. I find that an easier way to kind of tuck in the extra fabric you have right here at this corner. So once this is pinned and everything's tucked inside, you're going to sew around the edge. So you're going to sew along here, which will attach that piece down, but you're going to come up here and go around the points to give that collar a nice crisp edge. So that this has been sewn down, the collar is fully attached, and then you press it along this edge right here where the point ends, and then that is the collar. It is finished. So the next step is to do the sleeves. So you're going to take one sleeve. It's going to be like this. That's how it's going to be sewn in. So you're going to take this mark at the top and match it with this mark on the yoke. So flip that over and mark it, or pin it together. Then you're going to match this seam down here. And you're going to match you're going to pull your fabric and match it up. And then you'll do the same to the sleeve on the other side of the body. So you're going to sew this seam up here like this and backstitch when you start and when you stop. Now before we sew the side seam, we're going to hem the sleeves. So you're going to fold the sleeve up 1/2 inch twice and sew that 3/8 inch from the bottom edge and give it a good press, and then your hem will be sewn in place. And you are going to fold it like this with right sides together. You're going to match up your bottom edges, these side points, and your armpits. So pin those together, and then you're going to sew that seam all the way up to the sleeve. Once you have the side seam sewn, you need to tack it down towards the back so that there's no seam allowance like poking into the baby's arm. And then what we're going to do down here at the bottom is we are going to attach the facings to create the snap placket, you know, where you open the inseam to change the baby's diaper. So the first thing you need to do is 2 of these facings are going to need interfacing. So I'm going to interface 2 of these first. So this is one interfaced piece, and we are going to take it and place it here. I forgot to mention, you should just stitch this closed so you don't have 2 separate pieces right here. It makes it a little bit easier to sew. So you're going to match up this center piece with the center of the placket down here at the bottom. So pin this together, and then you are going to pin the facing all the way down, and it's going to stop 1 inch from the bottom. This is the hem allowance, and this will fold up here and cover it. So you can just let this piece hang here. So you're going to sew this curve right here, and then you're going to finish this outer edge with either a zigzag or a serger. And now before you turn it to the inside, we're going to take some scissors, and you need to clip into this inner curve of the seam allowance so that it can flip around. So now this has all that room to open up, and you are going to flip it inside. You can add some under stitching to this seam if you want to help it stay inside, but you're going to press this so that all of the facing stays on the inside. Now you're going to pin this facing in place all the way around. And you're going to sew up around here, and you're going to do a 1 inch from this inside edge all the way around to secure that facing. So now you're going to take these 2 pieces, one side is interface and one side is not, place them right sides together, and you're going to sew across the bottom, up around the top, and then across the other side. Once you have it sewn, you're going to trim these corners to reduce bulk, and then you are going to take pinking shears, or you can just cut notches, and you're going to cut around the top of the curve. Then you're going to turn it right side out and poke out the corners, and you're going to press this nice and flat. Once you have it pressed, you can add a row of edge stitching around the seam where you sewed, and this inner curve is going to be left open. Now we're going to sew this facing to the back of the romper, And it's the same as the front where it starts 1 inch from the bottom. So I'm going to match this here and this one to this side. Then I'm going to match this center mark with the center mark of the gusset. And then you're going to pin in between. It feels really weird and awkward because this romper changes direction and this inseam facing is like an inner curve. And so since you're doing two opposing curves, it feels really kind of awkward, but the seam will match up. You just kind of have to finagle it. While I'm sewing, I stop and move and adjust a lot to make sure that it will stay in place. So this is what it looks like sewn together, with this facing coming here and the gusset right there. I'll show you the inside. So this is the inside. I have sewn it and I had finished the edges, as you can see. And now we are going to press this seam allowance towards the body and towards the gusset and top stitch that in place away from the inseam facing. Now to do the hem, so this seam allowance is going to go towards the back. This seam allowance is going to be tucked inside. So I like to start here in the middle and I fold up 1/2 inch and then another 1/2 inch and I pin that in place. Then I come to the front and you are going to fold that up to match the bottom of your facing and then go up again, and that will enclose the facing and keep a nice edge for your hem. And pin in between that. Then in the back, you're going to tuck this seam allowance in. You're going to fold it up once and then again, and that makes it so the facing is right at the edge of the hem. Pin that in place and in between. And then you're going to sew across this to sew the hem in place, and then do the same to the other side. So once the hem is sewn in place, you can take the back facing and place it right behind the front facing so it'll sit just like this. Then you can add snaps to the front. And when I'm doing shorts, I usually do 2, 1 near the bottom and 2, up here close to the top. And if I'm doing the long pants version, sometimes I'll do 6, sometimes I will do 8. Once you have attached the snaps, you have finished the upcycled shirt romper. That's how you make the upcycled shirt, romper, shirt, and dress by Heather Handmade. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please let me know if you make this pattern. I would love to see pictures of a little baby or toddler wearing, it kind of looks like a grown-up item but just shrunk down for a baby or a toddler. Please share it with me on social media, and I hope you have a wonderful day.